When my friend got murdered, it wasn't a random shooting. It was a revenge hit. No one saw it coming, but everything soon made sense. Serious, what disturbing thing did you learn about someone only after their death? I received a phone call from my late husband's girlfriend on the day of his funeral. She was phoning his cell phone, which I had turned off while he was in the hospital. She told me that my husband had been paying her rent for the last year. The bank had recently foreclosed on our house. I had no idea he was unfaithful to me, but she knew all about me. This story is not uncommon. Brother-in-law's best friend rang him distraught after going through his recently deceased, much older sister's papers. He had discovered that she wasn't his sister as he had thought for the last 70 years, she was his mother. Usual story, teenage pregnancy, went to a convent to have the baby, gave it to mom to bring up. He had a good relationship with her, and he was upset because she couldn't tell him the truth. My buddy's mom totally killed my buddy's dad. She had taken a $200,000 life insurance policy out on him 6 months before he died, and he died from not taking his medication that he'd taken no problem all of his life. My buddy was away for the weekend, so I wasn't home when his dad died. After his mom died, we found out she'd taken a life insurance policy out on my buddy at some point too, and she'd also forged his signature to sign over $100,000 my buddy's dad had left to him. She also faked illnesses to get prescription drugs and had little books filled with info on what she'd sold and how much she'd made from selling them. I once had a friend whose dad died. And he never really talked about it, but he was pretty troubled. Every year on his death date, they would celebrate life party. He invited our friend group one year and we were all excited to be there to support him. Turns out his dad died in a car accident involving a drunk driver. The dad was the drunk driver and also killed the family he hit. After my grandfather's death, we were cleaning out his old house and I found an envelope with paperwork that basically said my dad had died by suicide. I had been told as a kid that it was a heart attack. It was a shitty way to find out the truth. My grandpa had stashed what would be worth millions today and proceeded to convince his family they were poor and had almost no money. His family lived in poverty while he lied to them all. My dad did something somewhat similar. He had sole control over all family finances. We definitely didn't live in poverty, by any means, but he stressed my mom out about bills and sudden expenses and stuff all the time, by claiming we were tight on money or running out of money, or he wasn't making as much at the moment, or etc. He'd go as far as claiming we could lose the house, lose the cars, he might lose his job soon, we might not be able to pay the water/electric/phone bill, oh no. Yeah. He had a shitton of money secretly stashed away in a separate bank account and was living lavishly on his business trips. There was never any danger to our house/possessions/way of life. He said those things and started those arguments for the sick pleasure of causing my mom pain/stress, and feeling powerful. And maybe for the thrill of having a secret. Who knows for sure, I guess. One of my best friends died suddenly and clearly didn't have a chance to clean up his affairs beforehand. He had a little family, so the group of friends handled everything. We found child porn in his house. Not just a few pieces or somehow accidental. It was in a file cabinet with folders and sorted by ages, sex, etc. Changed everything. That's simply not acceptable. I had a brother who had some paranoid delusions, FBI, CIA following him, spying on his apartment, etc. We, my brothers and I, had tried to get him help and he would just have no part of it. After a few years, it seemed like it had gotten better. He stopped bringing it up and we felt like it must have just passed. After he died, we found his journal and it was just horrifying. Right up until the night he died, he detailed all of the torture that they were inflicting on him, weird shit that I can't even write in here. It was just incredibly disturbing to read what a tortured life he was living inside his mind while acting relatively normal outside. That my grandfather molested my mom when she was a child. It started after my grandmother died and ended after he found someone else. I was pretty shocked, especially since my mom didn't seem to carry any kind of baggage from it, though of course, I don't know what went and still goes on in her head. Something that made sense though was how she always made sure my brother and I were either in her room to sleep whenever we stayed at Grandpa's place, which wasn't too often, or in the room next to hers. We were never alone with my grandfather, and we never had a warm or loving relationship with him. He was cold to us and we never really got attached to him, and we visited him maybe once a year. I think my mom felt obligated to have a relationship with him for some reason, But she was always very protective of us, and my brother and I were never victims of his. I had a great aunt and great uncle who were full-time missionaries in Africa. After they died, 3 of their grandchildren finally felt safe enough to share that my great aunt and uncle had molested them. That they didn't die when we thought? Here's the deal. My mom was raised by her mom, now 92, and an evil old bat, and her stepfather, who molested her. Where was Dad? Died when she was 11, allegedly. That's what my grandmother said. This would have been around 1961. Flash forward to 2015 and my sister is doing genealogy work on the family. Finds out not only did my biological grandfather not to die in 1961 but in 2005. And had 5 more daughters, one of which he gave the same name as my mom. So my mom got cheated out of a potential relationship with her dad by her liar of a mom, who moved and remained hidden from her ex, my mom's real dad. My grandmother moved down to Texas from Virginia to stay in a nursing home and basically make my mom and dad's life hell. We went to visit one weekend and she came over for dinner. And I dropped the bomb on her that we'd figured out she'd been full of shit for 50 years. She then had the nerve to act offended. My dad told her to shut the F up. An old, rich man my mom used to run errands for not only offered her $5,000 to sleep with him, but he also told her he couldn't wait till I was 18. I was younger than 12 at the time, and tried to make an arrangement to pay for my presents once I was 18. My mom stopped working for him then, and I was told this after he died a few years later. That not only did my grandfather physically, emotionally, and sexually abuse me but also my mother and 2 aunts. And my grandmother knew the whole time and had been confronted by all of them about it and she did nothing. I still can't look at her the same to this day. He's dead, but the memories aren't and she refuses to talk about it to this day. Here goes the story about it. So firstly, I was raised by my grandparents because my mother is her own type of garbage person. The abuse started, from my earliest memory, around 5. He always threatened to kill me or sell me off to someone who would do worse to me if I told anyone, and as a kid that scared me so badly into not telling. So from the age of 5 to about 10, I was abused on a daily basis because my grandmother was the sole provider for the family. He was on disability from the VA, so I was with him all day every day. After writing this and discussing this for the first time ever, I remembered something that I guess you could say I tried to repress. I remember telling my grandmother that he was hurting me when she wasn't around, but I couldn't put into words how I was worried that I'd get not only myself but her in trouble for me telling. She told me that I must have been dreaming or that it was my imagination because if he was hurting me I'd be covered in bruises. I never talked to her again about it. Also, I only know about my mother and aunts being abused due to letters I found in my grandfather's estate after he died. They were from my youngest aunt confronting him about what he did and demanding answers for the pain he caused. I haven't talked to any of them about it. I'm scared that bringing it up to them will just bring up more pain, but I want to finally have some kind of closure, even though I know it may be selfish. I just know that as a mother now, I couldn't imagine what I would do if my child came to me with something like this, except for something illegal. But writing this and talking about this for the first time in my 25 years of life has made me feel strangely better about it. That it wasn't my fault and I won't be judged for talking about my abuse. My father-in-law had a secret love child. We are not even sure he knew about them. He has been dead for 11 years, we found out about this person 2 years ago. When I was 14, my aunt died very suddenly. She was only 37, but she had a lot of health problems, overly obese, drug abuse, alcoholism, etc. As a family, we had tried our best to encourage her to get healthier, but disappointingly, she never listened to us. Nonetheless, she was always happy. Smiling, laughing, always complimenting me and saying how much she loved our family. I never understood why someone with such cheer and utter happiness could end up in the situation she was in. While I was spending the night with a distant cousin of mine, we got into a deep conversation about my aunt. We both spoke our feelings about the death, including my confusion for why she had so many problems. My cousin looked at me with an "oh no. You don't know?" kind of look. I asked what happened, but she hesitated. She asked me to not tell anyone I heard it from her. I said of course and pushed her to tell me. She explained how when my aunt was about 17, her mom, my grandma, had just gotten married to another man. His brother, let's call him T, was very close to my aunt. Apparently, they went out to ice cream and looked at fancy cars that he promised to buy her. When my cousin was telling me this, I was confused, because it's just an uncle and niece type of thing. Why is that so bad? Well, one night, my aunt had to spend the night at T's house while her parents worked graveyard. My cousin didn't exactly know what happened, but it was heavily implied and speculated that they slept together, or even worse, he assaulted her. This was because, after that night, my aunt asked to spend the night over and over again. She basically begged to see T every day. T and her parents eventually got tired of it and said that she wasn't allowed to go over there again. T never acted the same around her. He ignored her at family events, didn't take her out anymore, and never brought her up or even talked about her in conversations. After that, my aunt struggled to find a real boyfriend and even tried experimenting with girls. She never knew what real love was, and it was obvious that it bugged her. She had been played with by this tool and left in the dust. She eventually got a husband and had my favorite cousin that I love oh so much. But life wasn't kind to her. And I guess doing drugs and drinking her life away was her way to cope. It hurts to think that she passed thinking that she was nothing but a waste when in reality, she was a blessing to everyone who came in contact with her. It's been 3 years since she passed and I miss her dearly. I wish I could tell her how much I love and appreciated her. My cousin, only a few months older than me, the mid-30s, died tragically in really unexpected circumstances. We weren't hugely close, but it was a real shock and has really messed up her immediate family. About 6 months after she died, I found out that my police officer brother had randomly pulled her over, not knowing it was her, and breath tested her for alcohol, mandatory for every traffic stop where I live, and she was well over the limit and thus had drink driving charges brought against her. This was about a year before she died. But, because she and her family are kind of stuck up and perfect, not the type of people to accept that they might be alcoholics, they tried to claim my brother made the reading up because of a non-existent family grudge and tried to have him charged with misconduct, etc. and fired. It wasn't successful but made his life pretty miserable for a while. Her family doesn't know I know, but you can imagine that I'm pretty conflicted over telling them how fucked they are versus recognizing the impact her death has had on them and not adding to their troubles. TL, Doctor, my cousin died tragically, later learned that she and her family tried to sabotage my brother's police career because she couldn't handle him catching her drink driving. At my great-aunt's funeral, everyone was talking about how sad it was she didn't have kids. My grandma told me that it was because she'd gotten pregnant in the 40s out of wedlock and had a coat hanger abortion. The resulting infection rendered her sterile. Keep it safe and legal, folks. One of my good friends was shot last year. He was one of the nicest guys I knew. He always calls everyone he knew, checked up on them, made sure everyone was okay and was really supportive of everyone. Move forward a week or two after his murder, someone was arrested due to a murder that happened a few days before my friend's. Turns out the guy who was arrested was the cause of multiple murders, yet he had perfect alibis, everything, except we later found out that my friend was working for him, was getting paid $5-10K per person. When my friend got murdered, it wasn't a random shooting. It was a revenge hit. No one saw it coming, but everything soon made sense. My mom's uncle stole my grandfather's gun and killed himself. Afterward, they found out that he had been hiding in his ex-wife's bathroom for hours waiting to kill her and their kids, but gave up because they took so long to come home. They were pretty messed up after that and never really recovered. Thank you for watching Reddit Space. Please subscribe if you love these Reddit stories.